We go. It is. Well, you know what time it is. NFL Strategy Show. Dave Locker and Chris Spags coming to you on this beautiful Wednesday, December 4th. Week 14, Spags. We're there already, man.
We are there, and coaches are getting fired. We got Ron Rivera out. It's a sad week. Poor went out. People in the YouTube chat already talking about poor went out for Riverboat Ron. Any Riverboat gambler at all who's out of my life, I'm saddened. So sad for Ron Rivera, but hopefully we can move forward as best we can here, Lofty. I know it's an emotional day when we lose Ron Rivera in our lives.
Yeah, it is. I got the wrong name tag up for you. Since we did the new overlay, we hadn't, because last Wednesday we did the Thanksgiving show. So while we talk here, I'm going to make sure I can fix that up, make it look good for you.
Look, I don't mind being Manny. Manny beat me in the Osmo League this week with two guys who were not active in the lineup, which felt great. That was my chance to make the playoffs, and Ted Ginn got me a 0. He was in the lineup, and he got me a 0.
In the Osmo Charity League?
Yeah, in the Osmo Charity League.
So, oh, man. Yeah. So you're out, huh?
I think you and I both have the same record. I think we both can technically make the playoffs if Alex loses and we outscore him by 30 points or something. But okay. I'm assuming I'm out. Which is for the best at this point because I've been hanging on like just MacGyvering together a team.
Oh, for sure.
I had a terrible drafted at the bottom of the first round. It was over after that point.
No question. I in our Osmo internal league, that's the one I cared about because I had a bet with Chris Randone that I'd have a better team than him. And looks like we're going to get a W there. But dude, yeah. I think I told you this story. I saw his draft and he drafted like Ertz and Kelsey in like the first 2 rounds. I'm like, or first 3 rounds. I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? Right. So then, I talk shit. We always do. And then Nolan goes and makes a trade and gives him Derrick Henry and Cooper Kupp. For or it was Kittle. He drafted Kittle and Ertz, I think. Gave him Cooper Kupp and Derrick Henry for Kittle and someone else. And I was so mad at him because I was like, I just made a bet with this guy, right? And now you're giving him the farm. And Nolan liked the trade for him. Chris Randone obviously liked it for him. But Randone also had the first pick, so we went with Barkley, and that didn't help him. I had the first pick in a lot of leagues, went Barkley over McCaffrey. That was anyone that drafted second, what a huge boon that was for their entire season this year.
Well, for me, I do an auction league with my friends from back home, which we've been doing for like 15 years now. And that's what's auction. So I was like, I'll pay for McCaffrey. I don't care what the cost is. So I was locked in there. Yeah, with the charity league we're doing, I've kicked Christopher Harris's ass the 2 times that we have played. So I am the king of the Chris's by far. Lost to Lisa Ann, though, which kind of hurt. But I got my revenge on her in my own way.
Good.
Show her who's boss. We don't talk about that on the show, but no, it's been fun. I think the McCaffrey thing though, like if I had Barkley this year, I'd be so mad. One of my friends is going to miss the playoffs in the same league I was talking about because he has Barkley and he just keeps playing him. And it's like, you have to do that. You have to hope he positively aggressives. Maybe on Monday now that Eli Manning is apparently starting.
Well, dude, that's the thing. You don't even have a choice. You don't have a choice. You got to play him. That's it. Simple as that.
Yeah, positive regression, very due for Saquon Barkley, but it is hilarious. You saw that, right? That Daniel Jones is out now and your Eagles get Eli?
Yeah, how about that?
That'll be a fun Monday nighter. Eli back is kind of fun, though. Like, I'll tune in for it. I would have anyway, but I'll definitely watch that.
And I honestly feel like Eli's just going to carve him up. I'm done with the Eagles.
Losing to Miami was a tough look.
Oh, dude, it's as bad as it's honestly as bad as it gets. It's as bad as it gets. So I've given up. I am no longer an Eagles fan. That's not true, but I hate him. And here we are. So you ready to talk some football?
Yeah, I'm born ready for this. And you know what else I'm ready to talk about? Yahoo Sports.
Is that right? There's always YSRPs, good as cash, to be used on the site to win and play and win real money. You can't beat that, and you can sign up at awesomemode.com, Spags.
Well, this weekend, I was going out to dinner and we couldn't get a table at this really happening restaurant in LA. That's what all the cool people in LA say happening. That's referred to a restaurant. So I went up to the maitre d' and I was like, hey man, can we get a table? And he's like, no, like I can't help you out. We're packed. I was like, hold on a second. what if I slide you these? And I slid him a couple YSRPs, Yahoo Sports Rewards points, which are just as good as cash. And I don't know how I slid it to him. I just kind of did it mentally, and he assumed they just transferred to his account, much like Bitcoin. Transferred over his way. And he was like, these YSRPs are good here, man. Gave me the best table in the house, a 5-course meal. Didn't even have to pay for it. He was just so happy he got YSRPs because they are, again, just as good as cash.
Yes, that's true. Now, in real life, you can't use them at, Ruth Chris Steakhouse, but you can use them on Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. And in all seriousness, sign up using the code AWESEMO when you use our link at awesemo.com. Any NFL article, the free ones, the showdown ones, click on that. You'll see the link at the top. And when you do, go ahead, use the sign-up code AWESEMO, get $30 in YSRPs. Check out the $200,000 NFL baller, the $30K NBA baller tonight, and some management-free contests where everything you pay into the contest gets paid back out to you as the player. Use the link, use the sign-up code AWESEMO, get your $30 in YSRPs, and become a baller today. All right, man. So we got some ownership. And we got your Beyond the Numbers that we're going to get into as well. But let's take a quick look first here at initial ownership on Wednesday. Now, the big thing is this is going to change. Daily disclaimer, this will change. No question about it. You're going to see some big differences throughout the week as we get news, as injuries roll in. But right now, I don't want to say surprised, but on a 13-game slate, there's nobody above on DraftKings right now, nobody above 17%. And the two highest projected owned players right now are both on the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I think this will change throughout the week a little bit. I guess the prices are down for the matchup, so that certainly makes sense. And if you are a defense doesn't matter believer, like some people out there are, I think that's going to be a situation where you'd feel comfortable going to New Orleans, but I don't. I mean, Baltimore, that game was great with Baltimore and San Francisco last week, but Baltimore really just put that together by the skin of their teeth, getting that win there. I mean, they were moving the ball really by just moxie and sheer force of will. I don't know that New Orleans has that in them. I think we've seen them kind of play down to when the defenses are bringing pressure, when they are getting good coverage outside. I don't feel comfortable. Like Michael Thomas, he's a great player. He has a Twitter handle, can't guard Mike for a reason, but he has an outside coverage team. San Francisco is so good. And they also do a good job adjusting schemes for these guys where, Lamar can do it because he's such a unique weapon. And even then, he didn't have his best game of the year by any stretch. I find it hard to believe New Orleans is going to get going here against San Francisco.
So if Kamara and Thomas both remain that high owned, and I talked about this yesterday with Sal Vetri on the First Look show, if Kamara was going to come in with lower ownership at that price, I would have a lot of interest, no question. But if he is going to be, say the most popular running back, even though ownership's not going to ever be crazy on a 13-gamer, I don't think I'm going to have a ton of him. And one of the reasons for that is San Francisco ranks number 1 against pass-catching running backs this season, according to Football Outsiders. The bulk of his production has been coming on through the air, so that's pretty significant to me. Now, if it comes down and you get him around like 10%, which I think could be the case, I'll still have some. But Alvin Kamara, it's a very difficult matchup for him. And I know people are looking for him to rebound after some bad games. He is seeing the large majority of snaps, but on the ground, you might only get 12 carries for him again, and you're going to have to rely on him to get it done through the air, which to me is somewhat of a concern.
Yeah, I think, that's the one thing San Francisco does really well is they defend the pass, exceedingly well compared to the rest of the league, giving up just 134 passing yards a game. The run defense does offer some vulnerability of 4.7 yards per rush. Not the best run defense grade from PFF either. There's 71 run defense grade on there. So that's beatable, I think, according to how that would shake out a little bit closer to middle of the pack compared to the pass game. So I guess you could maybe run it with Kamara, but I feel like that's more Murray would be the guy you want to run between the tackles more to have the most success. So I'm just not confident in the ownership here. And I do think it'll change a little bit. And at that point, as you mentioned, like if Kamara is 10%, sure, I'll take those stabs. But Thomas is the chalk play of the week and him seeing maybe double teams and stuff. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a great spot, but I could be wrong. We are often wrong. Shockingly.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And the offense is very concentrated there. So it's something you always want to keep in mind. But look, the Saints have a 23.5 implied, 21 for the Niners. It's a 44.5 total. Look, it's much lower than you'd normally see for a game with the Saints at home. It's a very difficult matchup. And look, the truth is, have any teams really gotten to the Niners this year? I know that Russell Wilson had a decent game, a decent outing against them. But in all seriousness, there hasn't been a team that's really gutted them at all, right? I mean, I guess Arizona put 26 up. Seattle put 27 up, but that was also an overtime game. They've done a really good job. It's funny. Arizona seems like the one team that's actually been able to score against them. Outside of that, they've shut everyone down.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Arizona's scoring too has been, I mean, the Andy Isabella play is one that sticks out to me from that one Thursday night game they had where it was just, they were getting nothing going and then he gets a 98-yard catch and run. So, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm looking at the box scores for the defense now. They've only given up over 300 yards twice on the year, as you mentioned, Seattle, Arizona. Yeah, I don't know. Like, if Baltimore can put up 20 points against you, and that was them really working hard and getting some good runs and Lamar doing the most Lamar stuff. I think that says it all to me, is that if you can impress Baltimore and keep them, in pocket, I think the Saints are a much easier team to predict what they're trying to do. I think it's going to be one of those games where Breeze throws like a touchdown to Josh Hill, a touchdown to Cook, a touchdown to Traquan Smith, and you're like, oh, he had 3 touchdowns. Like, I don't know how that happened, but that's really kind of the outlier even still. Like, I don't think he's going to have 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. I just find it hard to believe. So
when you're looking at some other top-owned guys, by the way, happy to have everyone with us as always on this Wednesday. Only a few weeks to go, man. 4 weeks to go, and then we'll switch over to some playoff programming. We won't be doing the strategy show every day, but we'll definitely have enough to get you guys set and ready. Damn, that's a lot of geese outside. Are
the geese coming for you?
Are they going south this late? I thought they traveled south earlier than this, no?
I mean, the weather's been weird, right, over there. I don't know. Yeah. Like here, it's rainy and 50 degrees, so I don't know. But global warming probably screws up everything, would be my guess.
It's climate change now, Spags.
It's climate change. My bad. I got to keep up with the PC terms.
Yeah. And before anyone says anything, we're not getting political here. So, what's crazy though? Hunter Henry, 3rd highest projected ownership right now.
Yeah.
On the entire slate, not just at his position, on the entire slate.
He's been good. I don't know that he's that good. Right. I mean, Hunter Henry is one of the guys we talked about earlier in the year when we were doing our articles in the preseason or the offseason with, I thought he was going to have a down year. He ended up being hurt, then came back. He's looked good. I just don't feel like he's a guy I ever need to lock in. Like, he'll give you that mid-teens fantasy points, maybe some more upside on that. But Jacksonville, I guess, stinks enough where people want to attack it. 14% DVOA boost to tight ends. You can probably sell me on it. The tight end slates haven't been that good the last couple of weeks, so maybe. But that's a lot. It's a lot Hunter Henry. I would say that
it is. I want to talk about one guy. Spend some time here. Our YouTube chat got some sharp guys in there each day. That this has been a conversation we've seen so often lately, based on Le'Veon Bell's ownership. Right now, we've got him as your 4th highest projected owned player on the slate. This is DraftKings, where he's 7,200, right? Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if Le'Veon Bell continues to garner this much ownership throughout the week and finish as, a top 5 owned player on a 13-gamer. Once again, 13 games, ownership is going to be a lot more spread out. But you have to consider a couple things with Bell, man. His long run of the entire season is 19 yards. He does not have a 20-yard rush all season long. He has 2 receptions of 20-plus yards. That's it. Nothing longer than 23. There's just been no chunk yardage ability from him, no breakaway ability. And I get it. It's Miami. It's a bad defense, a bottom-tier run defense. There's no question about it. But we keep paying what I would consider a premium for Le'Veon Bell. And I had said it earlier in the year, trade for him because he's got this amazing schedule coming up, right? Look at this, Jacksonville, Miami, New York Giants, Washington, Oakland, Cincinnati, now Miami again. He's finished with 20 fantasy points once. And that was against Miami, where he had 20.1 fantasy points, which at 7,700 was eh. And that's because he had 9 receptions. He doesn't have, check this out, dude. This might surprise you. He hasn't gone over 70 yards all season long on the ground.
Wow, I did not know that.
He has
That's
one
crazy.
70-yard game, came against New England. He doesn't have a game with more than 70 rushing yards all season long.
Yeah, I haven't been there frequently other than that Miami week. I think that was the one week I had a good amount of them and it was fine. Like it wasn't a bad experience. So I don't have that bad taste in my mouth. It was kind of like Miles Sanders last week where I had a ton of Miles Sanders. And I was like, this is the spot I'm ready to play him. I wasn't wanting to get there the 2 previous weeks. And I think Bell here going against Miami again, like it's weird though. He had 15 touches against Cincinnati and that's a team, granted they did fall behind there, I guess enough where they didn't want to run as much, but that's a team that just gives up so much on the ground. You would think that's where you want to run Le'Veon quite a bit. But the Jets are running just 38% of the time, which is not a great number. You know, it's just Adam Gase doing Adam Gase things, like not having an explosive passing offense, but really wanting to rely on the passing offense for reasons that don't make sense. Maybe him spitefully, you know, kind of acting out towards the Bell signing because he reportedly didn't like that too much either. But it is odd. He's definitely killed his value and hard to trust, but I would still at least match the field on him because he's going against Miami at home, and that's sort of the ideal spot. If you were going to have one last game before you probably shut him down for the year.
I think one of the most like fun aspects of researching NFL and really any sport, but particularly NFL because it's once a week thing, is excuse me, finding the chalk at a certain position and seeing are there good alternatives here. And at running back, you've got Lev Bell and you've got Alvin Kamara, $200 apart, both of them as your first and second highest owned running backs. And your first and fourth highest owned players on the slate. When you look at some of the players around them, take an Aaron Jones, for example. Obviously, he doesn't own that backfield, which is kind of difficult. But he's 6,700 coming in at significantly lower ownership. Anybody else here? I mean, you're not going – Kareem Hunt at that price tag is absurd. I don't understand that at all. Josh Jacobs against Tennessee. Melvin Gordon, 64 against Jacksonville. What are you thinking – about some of these similarly priced players to two very popular ones in Bell and Kamara?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking through now. I guess that's sort of why Bell and Kamara have the ownership is that these guys in the price range, maybe not quite as much of a slam dunk. I mean, Oakland, I guess being at home against Tennessee, that could be a spot where they get something going here. But Tennessee's run defense is pretty good. So you really have to trust Josh Jacobs' volume and Oakland's ability to kind of bounce back after 2 really bad games in a row. Maybe getting back home helps them out a bit. But I don't know that I'd have a ton of faith there. I think one guy, and he is one of the beyond the numbers guys that I'd be willing to go down to this week instead of paying for these guys is James White. I'm just really intrigued by him here. It seemed like he had the workload, like he had the lead running back role in that last game, and going against Kansas City, that's a really profitable spot to have if he is going to have 20 plus touches in this game. And Michelle's been bad enough all year. Rex Burkhead didn't take much off the table. Like, I think it's a time to go to James White here if you're New England and nothing is working for you. And he had a decent day running the ball, and now he gets a positive run matchup. Like, I think that would be the move I would be more inclined for right now. But yeah, at that price point, you have a lot of guys. Like, to me, I think I'll have probably one pay up option and then like a James White tier running back. Like Cook, I think is good if he's healthy. McCaffrey, get the $200 savings on DraftKings. How could you not? It's Black Friday for Christian McCaffrey. I think, ironically enough, I think that there's a lot of ways to go here that maybe the 7K tier isn't the move if everybody's going there.
So, okay, a couple of interesting things here that with James White that are against Dallas. That game was competitive throughout, but they were never really like in dire need of getting playmakers the ball. If you know what I mean, like they didn't have to force anything. Right. James White did nothing. I thought he'd be solid there. Against Philadelphia, another very, very competitive, tight game. James White, 7 targets, 4 receptions, didn't really do much. What's interesting, however, is his highest touch counts or carries have been in the 2 games that they've lost this season, where they were playing from behind throughout. He saw 14 attempts against Houston. They played from behind for a while, and then 9 attempts against Baltimore where they played from behind. It's kind of interesting that it's not only that he's getting, like, he had 11 targets against Houston, 3 against Baltimore, but it is kind of strange that he doesn't, right, in games where they have in games where they're playing with a comfortable lead, he's still been targeted a lot, but he hasn't been used on the ground. It's odd. He's been used on the ground 23 times in the 2 games they've lost.
Yeah, I guess that's just to try to keep the defenses honest. I don't know. I mean, like, I guess it does make more sense. It's just the thing to me is that Michel's been so ineffective on a per carry basis on the year and New England's clearly struggling. I mean, offensively, at least. Defensively, they still have looked good, but offensively, they need to figure things out where I was reading it as more of not a changing of the guard by any stretch, because Michel will still be involved. They'll still do the running back by committee. But I think an acknowledgement that White's been a better per carry back. And even then, really not that much better. He's only got 3.9 yards per rush compared to 3.5 for Michel. But he's more explosive, and then you don't have to sell. Like, if you're running the ball with him, it's not a dead giveaway that it's going to be a pass every time.
I was just going to say the same thing. That's the one huge benefit of not having Michel on the field.
Yeah, and this is a spot where you could be able to get White out there more because Kansas City gives up 5.1 yards per rush. So, look, if I were New England, I would try to give White the carries. I mean, maybe you save him for the playoffs. Maybe that's the thing where they don't want to give him too much unless they absolutely need to. But this game is one where they need to. Like, this is a playoff seeding game. This is kind of an important one. So I would go to White this week, but definitely risk there. If Michel gets 20 carries this week, I'll give up, and shouldn't be surprised by that.
No question. Some of the ownership though just stands out to me, and it has me going in opposite directions. Let me ask you about Dalvin Cook, 9,500, basically identical ownership to Christian McCaffrey this week. That's got to change, right? Like, that has to change. And assuming Dalvin Cook plays, of course.
It's a pretty nice matchup for Cook. So I really don't mind going there at all. If you're saving a little bit of money, and then you also get, the same kind of, maybe not the same upside, but comparable upside. I think the shoulder thing is a bit of a concern. If you're Minnesota, do you need to put him out there this week? And I think you get probably the same production out of Madison, so it might be wise to save him. But he seems confident he's going to play. If he's confident he's going to play, as a Detroit team who I would think is not going to have the same success with David Blow again this week, assuming that he's starting. I don't know if Jeff Driscoll might take that spot back or whatever, but seems like a spot where they should be up and Cook should get the work. So I like Cook. I certainly don't mind the McCaffrey discount, but I think to me it'd be a week to have a lot of Cook and a lot of McCaffrey and just hope that the higher price guys do what higher price guys do and have that 25, 30 fantasy point floor.
John McAllister says, when James White is in the formation, the Patriots pass the ball 84% of the time. I'd love to see what that number looks like over the last 3 weeks, Spags.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions about what the Patriots are doing right now. They need to figure some stuff out offensively, and James White is really the one guy they have not used up to his full capability. So hopefully it gets better. Hopefully they are not as predictable with him in the moving forward.
Alvaro Keller says Jacobs couldn't do shit against Kansas City. Didn't he have a 100-yard game? Pretty sure he rushed for 104 yards or something.
He had 104 yards on 17 carries.
6.1 yards per attempt.
So he couldn't get shit going. It's tough day at the office, averaging 6 yards per carry.
Wow. No, they just got trashed. But, dude, Timothy said he had 100 yards in the first half. I don't know if that's true. I'll take your word for it. But, dude, Jacobs was super efficient. You already mentioned Tennessee being a difficult matchup. Somebody also mentioned in chat that he's been much better at home than he has on the road. A couple of things there. Keep this in mind. Home game Cincinnati, win. Home game Chargers, win. Home game Detroit, win. Home game Chicago, win. Home game Kansas City, they lost. Home game Denver, win. So they've lost one game at home. It's not a home road splits thing for him. It is a win-loss game script for him because he'll get phased out of the offense entirely once they start playing with a big deficit from behind.
Yeah, and he's also, the touchdown equities come down a bit for him too because they're not moving the ball as well. But it's
what's happened to them over the last 2 weeks?
Road games,
even 3 weeks.
Road games, I think, are a big part of it. Also, the matchups aren't the best, but I think them on the road is just not as effective. And
17 against Cincinnati at home, though. I mean, that's rough.
Yeah. Well, but he had 23 carries there. He just didn't get in the end zone. Like, right. I don't know.
I meant the offense in general. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, the offense. Yeah. I mean, the offense to me was always kind of a paper tiger where they had a couple good weeks there, but it didn't seem like they were winning mostly out of, I think, variance more than anything, where they seemed due for some regression back to just being okay. But yeah, I don't know. I don't trust this Oakland offense going against Tennessee. Tennessee's defense is actually good enough to get this done. And if they limit Josh Jacobs in a meaningful way, which they've done a lot in a lot of these matchups, they've stopped a lot of good running backs. The Titans have. I just don't see how that offense gets going. And I don't want to trust Derek Carr, with there being no opportunity to run the ball at all. Like, he just hasn't shown much at all this year from a fantasy perspective or a real life one.
Dwayne Tomka says, I think the play is Madison. No, even if Cook is playing and starting. Dwayne, we appreciate your patronage. I know you're always in here, brother. But maybe Spags and I disagree. Madison, if he was minimum salary, that's one thing, but I don't see why you would go to Madison at like 4,500 if Dalvin Cook is active.
No, they're not sharing enough of a workload there. You do that. If you expect Cook to get hurt and then leave the game again, that's something. But that's an expectation you can't have in a game, especially on a 13-game slate. So no, I would not think Madison's the play. If Cook is out for sure, like in Madison starting, then yeah, go to him. I think that's fine. Madison's a really good back who's been getting the same results as Cook and the limited sample size of handoffs that he's had or touches that he's had. But yeah, I agree. Like it's Cook. If Cook is starting, you play Cook.
Here's a fun one for you. Devonta Freeman right now getting, how about this? The same ownership projection right now as Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey. And, much of this comes down to he is in a good matchup. The Carolina run defense has been gutted on many occasions. And maybe we see that be the case again this time. Washington, you saw what Darius Geis did to them last week, man?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He's looking good. He's looking pretty feisty for a guy who's been banged up every single season.
He looks really good. No question about it. We're actually going to talk a little bit about him in a minute. But yeah, the Panthers gave up 248 rushing yards to Washington last week, man. 248. They've had a couple games where they've contained run defenses, one of them being Brian Hill in Atlanta a few weeks back.
Of course.
I know. 163 to Green Bay. That was Aaron Jones' huge game. 232 rushing to the 49ers. That was the huge tournament. It's funny because tournament winning running backs have faced Carolina quite a bit. Tevin Coleman, Aaron Jones. I don't know if Geis was in any of them, but if he was, he probably would have been a tournament winner. 166 to the Rams, 149 to the Jags, 136 to the Houston Texans. You get my point. Freeman isn't a particularly efficient runner, but I do think that this game stays pretty competitive. New coach, by the way, as you mentioned, Ron Rivera gone, 47 over under. Falcons are 3-point favorites at home, so it does feel like a pretty favorable spot for Freeman. What are your thoughts?
So I think the issue is that Atlanta just doesn't run the ball. Like, they're running it at a 31% clip, which is the lowest on the slate. Might be one of the worst marks in the league. So that's really the risk, is that they just don't commit to the run at all. But you're right. I mean, the matchup has been good. I think that was why a couple weeks ago I was very in on Brian Hill because of the matchup. Carolina's given up over 5 yards per rush, given up 137.5 rushing yards per game. So that's one of the worst marks in the league. Bad grade from PFF too. So it's not like it's one of those things that's an aberration where it's like, oh, they're going to get better. A 62 run defense grade from PFF, which is bad. So these are a lot of things that would be favoring the run game. It's just, does Freeman get those touches? And does he get those touches in week 14? Like, what is the point of giving Freeman a lot of touches right now? I mean, maybe he wants it. Maybe it's just, maybe he wants to put one more stamp on things because they could change the running backs up next year and he's out. So that's a motivation thing. But I think this is the time of year. I don't know if this factors in for you, but I think motivation is kind of a factor to me at this point. Atlanta's playing for nothing. Why would you commit to the run heavily with Freeman if he's just going to get hurt? I don't know. Like, there's some risk to a guy like that in this particular spot, I would think.
Look, I'm not disagreeing there. I do think that his salary is decent enough though. But like, this is why ownership does play pretty heavily in my decision making. If Freeman is actually going to be chalky, there's so many ways to get away from that with like comparable players with similar, if not heavier workloads. You know what I mean? And really the same efficiency, if not better. Like, Freeman ran 24 routes in his return last week. That's not bad. It's funny because Alvin Kamara ran 24 too, but that was a game that they were pretty comfortably ahead. He's okay, but I do think it's interesting to look at, say, how about this? Freeman is sandwiched in between Phillip Lindsay and James White. And right now you've got Phillip Lindsay coming in with around 10% ownership, so not that much further down. And then James White at 5%. But Lindsey, despite not being efficient, is getting the bulk of opportunities over Royce Freeman, even though their snap counts are pretty similar. The touches have been going pretty heavily to Phillip Lindsay. So I do think there are some alternatives if Freeman ends up coming in around 20%.
Yeah, I think that's what I would shake out with these kind of these different price tiers that we have at running back, where there seem to be lower owned guys at each of these price tiers, and they are the ones that I'm most intrigued by. And Lindsey's not, it's particularly low owned per se, but he is lower owned than Freeman. I just don't trust the workload with Freeman. And Timothy in the YouTube chat points out, is there really that much of a difference between Freeman and Brian Hill? And I'm looking at it, and to me, mentally there is, but looking at the actual numbers, I mean, Freeman on the year has 3.4 yards per rush. Brian Hill has 2.9, so that's not good. But still, is it that much worse? Like, it's still not a good number for Freeman either. And the line sucks. That's a big part of it too. And then yards per catch, Freeman's got 7. Hill's got 6.9. Like, it's really not a difference between these guys in terms of the things. Yards after contact, same thing. Freeman 2.3, Hill 2.4. And that's one they can actually control. And Hill's actually better at it. So, like, it's funny to me that people might be paying for like chalk Devonta Freeman after like we just saw chalk Brian Hill, and they might be the same player, do absolutely nothing in the same spot. That's kind of the fear I would have.
Yeah, and this might surprise you. You know, Brian Hill was running almost 20 routes per game when Freeman was out.
Oh yeah, he had a lot of opportunity. He just was terrible. He just like that game. The game where he was chalk was the most frustrating because he actually had the opportunity. Like, people are like, well, I don't know, it's split backfield. He had like 15 potential touches in that game.
Yeah.
And he had goal line carries too, even though Allison took a few more. Like, he had the shots, he just did nothing with it.
He actually got into the end zone, but it was called back on a hold. So
right. That's right.
There's that. One more spot is the run defense for, I'm sorry, not the backfield for Kansas City. This is a spot where I just have no idea what to do. Let's just assume Damian Williams is out. I mean, is there anything that you feel confident in with this game, knowing that Damian Williams could sit? Darrell Williams is also expected to sit. And LaShawn McCoy, even in this spot, like was really underutilized in a game that, yes, they were playing with a lead, but is it going to be Darwin Thompson? It might be. I have no idea what to think of this backfield, even if Damian Williams and Darrell Williams are out.
I wouldn't mind taking a few stabs at McCoy just because, I mean, like the one game that I'm looking at right now at the box scores, and this is one I was trying to figure out where I remember the most, but the game against Baltimore seemed like they used him and got him involved more. And that's, to me, is kind of the most similar matchup they've had in New England, where a tough defense is going to bring good pressure and going to defend outside receivers fairly well. The Baltimore was worse at defending outside receivers at that point of the season in week 3. But I think that could be a situation where maybe McCoy gets those same amount of touches where he's a reliable back. I don't know that I would want to trust Darwin Thompson going against New England when he hasn't been a proven guy. Give him some touches, work him in as a home run threat kind of guy. I think that seems fair. Or if Darrell Williams is fine, I think the same thing for him. He's been a good pass catcher. But this seems like a game where you can maybe lean on McCoy a little bit more, or at least try to, and hope he gets results. So that would be the reason I would take a stab at it. Not something I'd be confident in, but I think that's a reason where you can give it a shot and hope that, all right, maybe he can somehow get something going here. And that's a game plan that they've just been keeping in their back pocket for a tough game like this one.
Okay. When you're looking at wide receivers, we already talked about Michael Thomas. Another Mike Evans game where he's likely going to have quite a bit of ownership. It's an interesting one because the Indy secondary really hasn't been all that bad. I'm not going to act like they've been spectacular, but they've been good enough. And I told Manny on Monday, I legitimately cannot get these Tampa Bay receivers correct between Godwin and Evans. If I play neither of them both go off. If I play both, O.J. Howard and Brashad Perryman go off. And if I play Godwin, Evans goes off. Simply cannot win there. Mike Edwards against Pierre Desir, I would assume that's going to be the matchup here. Not as much of not a shadow matchup, but should see most of him. And I guess it's a decent enough spot. Chris Godwin, I don't know what to make of these guys, though. I generally just say, I'll screw it. Unless there's a shadow matchup with Evans, I'll play the guy that's lower owned. But a lot of times it doesn't even matter. And a lot of times they're the same ownership. Yeah,
we had the theory, or I think it was backed enough by data points where it's like, oh, when the When the Bucks are ahead, that it's going to be a Godwin game because they're not throwing deep as much. If they're behind, it's going to be an Evans game. And now we have seen the OJ Howard and Rashad Perriman, the Scotty Miller games too. It's all over the place where it's not as predictable as I think it seemed like it was going to be for part of the early part of the year. I don't mind going to Godwin here. I think more so. It seems like me. I think Indianapolis plays more zone. I know they're generally a defense trying to keep the ball in front of them. And to me, that makes it more of a Godwin spot. I like him when generally there's either zone coverage or teams that just aren't trying to give up the deep ball. They're willing to give up the shorter routes because that's where Godwin can find holes in coverage and have the decent days. But I think with the prices close enough this week, like last week, it made sense to go to Evans because he was so much cheaper. I guess I would favor Godwin, but it's a dice roll like every single week now. Even last week, they made it a dice roll with Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber because Jones missed one blitz pickup, and then Barber goes for a big day, which was very tilting for me as somebody who had a good amount of Jones. So Tampa Bay, just know your risks going in that they love screwing you and going to the opposite guy every single week without fail.
Yep, exactly. You're not lying, man. Do you go back to Davante Adams here at 8K?
I don't mind ever going to Adams. The price being up isn't the best thing in the world, but I mean, he barely had yard. He had 60 yards in that game and 2 touchdowns. Like he's been very efficient. Rodgers has been very efficient throwing to him. After that kind of initial early start of the year where things were slow, keeps feeding him targets, keeps giving him looks. So I don't mind Adams at all here. I think the price is not the most ideal. I don't think you're going to get him as much in crunches this week based on that price coming up and Washington's defense being a decent one, not a good one by any stretch, but decent enough where they're not going to be a sieve overall where they're going to pop a ton in projections. But I don't mind Adams. It's just like, it's not as much of a must-have play. Whereas to me last week, he was like one of the guys I had in like over 50% of lineups.
Yeah, you had to get Adams in lineups last week. 7K, just too good. Not to mention, we all knew, or at least we all should have known, that for somebody as talented as Adams that gets as many opportunities in the red zone, that positive regression was coming from a touchdown standpoint. 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. Those are his 3 touchdowns on the season through 8 games. I think you're going to keep finding more opportunities, more touchdowns for him because he's too good. And they really don't have any other viable pass catchers. Put it this way. Alan Lazard last week had 2 touchdowns. He had a touchdown and 103 yards. You're not going to see that very often. He was targeted only 3 times. And one of the things that keeps me coming back to Davante Adams is this. Look at the targets for Green Bay. Look at what we get for the wide receiver, Spags. Adams had 10. And then Valdez-Scantling, and Lazard had a combined 8. So he had, what's that, like 55, 60% of the total wide receiver targets. Jimmy Graham, Mercedes Lewis, and Robert Tonyan had a combined 4. So of all of the targets between receivers and between tight ends, he had 10 of 22? That's crazy. And Aaron Jones and Williams will get some work in the passing game, but Davante Adams is just every single week going to be loaded up with targets.
Yeah, the price is a bit of a sticker shock, and the fact that they seem still like they prefer to run more than pass overall, just in terms of volume. But I don't mind Adams, and that's a crazy market share for him to have overall of the receivers. I think he's the only Green Bay Packer I'd want to play. Like, it sucks because last week you really could have gotten there and had a really big week if you went to the Rodgers plus Lazard plus Adams stack. But how do you trust Lazard to do that again? Like, I think Lazard's the best out of that receiver group, out of the Scantling, Valdez-Scantling, Allison tier of guys, but he just doesn't get the work each week. And I think that's where just Adams is the only guy you can trust here. So yeah, you talk me into a little more Adams, but the price is still kind of gross, where I feel like I'll end up paying for mostly cheaper receivers. Like 8K, like I'd rather have Michael Thomas, I think, at that price point, even though he's in the tougher matchup, which seems kind of odd.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, Michael Thomas, it's a good point. Michael Thomas being so closely priced to Davante Adams. It's funny because Michael Thomas, brutal matchup, and then Tyreek Hill, who's priced in between Davante Adams and Michael Thomas, is 8,100. He's going up against the New England Patriots. But the big thing is is there any way to actually defend Tyreek Hill? Like, can he not get behind any secondary? Is this another spot where Tyreek Hill can burn them? In 2 games against them for his career, one last year, one the year before, he lit them up both times. definitely a better secondary, one of the best, arguably the best in the league. But does Tyreek Hill stand out to you as somebody that at right now ownership is at less than 6%? Is that enough to say, hey, I'll get some of that, or are you just not trusting this spot?
It's not a great spot at all. And Tyreek Hill killed me last week, as you would have thought he would go nuts against Oakland and be the guy who drives that blowout. And he was not even involved, really. I mean, he had 8 targets and certainly could have broken one, I guess, but just the results were not there for him. But I think you're right. Like, it's worth taking a few stabs, especially if Michael Thomas does retain that chalk ownership. Like, I still would prefer him, I think, to Adams. I got to think about that a little more because the prices are close enough where I'd prefer Thomas Adams because I feel like the floor is a little bit more there. But Hill is right in that mix in terms of if these guys are going to be owned more significantly, I'd rather just kind of split the ownership between the three of them because they're all within the range of $200 on DraftKings, and they all have similar upside, and they're all in gross matchups. And Hill is going to be the most under-owned because of the gross matchup. But according to PFF, he still has a 21-point advantage on the guy he's going to be covered by. And that's going to be a situation where Hill can get going. The speed's always there, as you mentioned, in every matchup. So, yeah, I think I would take stabs at Hill as much as these other guys because I think they're all going to be in bad spots. And, yeah, Hill they have being shadowed by J.C. Jackson, who would be a substantial advantage. I don't know why they wouldn't have Gilmore on him. I don't get that.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Pro Football Focus is just wrong. Yeah. I think they're going to do a little bit more than single coverage to take him out of this one anyway. But in all seriousness, I'm always willing to play Tyreek Hill. When Tyreek Hill's ownership is super low because of the matchup, it really feels like that is the best time to play him.
Yeah, and I think too, that's to me why I think going to a mix of Adams, Thomas, and Hill and just being like, here's the salary spot I'm dedicating to this one receiver.
Yeah.
One of these guys will have it, I think would be the move because I think any of them can have that 30, 35 fantasy point upside. Just a matter of the fact that none of them really look. I mean, Adams is in a good spot, to be clear, but the price is up enough where it kind of levels out a bit where I think these guys are all on pretty even keels. It is kind of too, just thinking about it a little bit, because as you mentioned that they would probably sell out to stop Tyreek Hill. It does kind of make it more of an intriguing Travis Kelce spot. Like,
yeah.
I feel like
and maybe
these
Watkins,
games,
but he's been terrible.
Yeah, Watkins hasn't been doing much, but going to a little bit of both these guys too. I think at the ownership, Kelce going to be much more owned, but I think Watkins and Kelce a bit more appealing. Kelce to me though, I think that is the one spot according to DVOA that they are weakest. I guess it's only a 10% decrease in production, whereas to wide receiver ones, they're given a 37% decrease. Wide receiver twos, a 69% decrease, which is not so nice in that spot. Wide receiver threes, 41% decrease. So that's like they're covering everybody in the wide receiver corps pretty well. So maybe Kelce gets there a little bit more and just sees the easiest coverage against the linebackers.
Another thing to consider too, this game opened at 49.5. So no matter how good New England's defense has been, they're only 3-point favorites. This is expected to be right now is projected for the highest overall score on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in the playoffs last year where it was still a pretty competitive game. Mahomes still had almost 300 passing yards in that game. So there were guys who got going. Actually, how did Hill do last year in the playoffs? That'd be something I'm curious about.
I feel like that wasn't the weather really shitty and it affected Mahomes. I feel like it did, but
so Mahomes had a decent day. Hill had a bad day where he had 1 catch out of 3 targets for 42 yards. But that was after he killed them in the beginning of the year when he had the 142 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Exactly.
What a game. Oh, Jesus. He's a monster, both as a human being and as a football player.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But I'm with you. Now, last one on this. Do you think Mahomes at 4% ownership is worthwhile?
Again, the same thing sort of with these other guys where the prices is down or our prices are down enough where it does make sense. Just hope that they can keep the performance going in a contrarian spot. And, Lamar had a good day against New England. So there is a precedent there. Definitely a different kind of player with how he uses the run, set up the pass. And just within a play itself where he'll run up to the line of scrimmage and everybody's like, oh crap, we got to stop Lamar. And then he'll just throw it and throw some like weird sidearm thing. It's a different situation, but yeah, I think anytime a guy's cheap enough and the potential there, and it's certainly viable to go there, but I wouldn't go crazy. Like I think I wouldn't do a mock Levin yesterday with Lonnie Walker and go like 50% Patrick Mahomes because I just don't think it's that kind of spot.
Yeah, that was wild. Lonnie Walker got hot off the bench and then double overtime. So
yeah. I still don't get how you have whatever 33%, 50% of him. I don't know. I don't know how
Oh,
that
I have
works out.
absolutely zero idea how that happened, but it did, and he won a lot.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Is that how much he had?
I think I saw somebody tweet it. I know it was more than 33. I think it might have been 50, but yeah, it
My,
was a lot. And
my goodness.
people were like, is this conspiring behind the scenes? And like, I don't think you could conspire that unless he has like a Spurs source. I think that was just
Yeah,
like one of those weird GPP moves.
that would seem unusual for sure. I think it was. In all seriousness, dude, that happens very, very, very infrequently. That you get a guy that's barely in the rotation, you know, doing that.
He
Even
still
even
had
if
like
Aldridge was out.
he still had a high ownership percentage of Porzingis too, who wasn't good yesterday. So it wasn't like he didn't have the almanac from Back to the Future. Like he wasn't doing
Right,
that. So
right,
that
for
was good.
sure. Well, let's talk about tight ends, and we'll go beyond the numbers. Deeper dive coming up later today, live before lock. All of that for NBA Specs. What do you got coming up?
I have my column, the slants and go for NFL, be coming up later. 4 corners for NBA and the switch and hedge for NBA. So I'll have 2 columns coming out today and the 4 corners. As soon as we finish this, I'll dig in. But yeah, I usually do my football column yesterday, but I had to go to the vet and didn't get a chance to do it. So you'll be getting all the freshest takes, all this insight that Lofty's given me in the slant and go this week.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
So
I'll quote you directly.
I would love that. So right now at tight end, really there's no cheap guys that are getting a lot of ownership. As a matter of fact, there's no discounted guys. Nobody below 46. There's no one put it this. No one above actually. No one in the 4K range or higher that's getting even 10% or more ownership. Like Henry, Travis Kelce, Kittle, Jack Doyle, Darren Waller. Right now, these guys are all pretty concentrated as your highest owned tight ends. Not a lot of value like there was yesterday or last week where you had Tyler Higbee and Jack Doyle very cheap.
The best week ever. It's so annoying because I used to play so many like double tight end situations like last year, and that's tends to not be a plus EV move. But this week it was the move to go to Doyle and Higbee, and I had so much Higbee, so much Doyle, but very little of it together. And that Higbee day was I've never been happier to be over the field on a guy than to see him go for 100 yards and a touchdown. Like who would have guessed that?
Truly absurd. I was like basically matched the field and wished that I had more, but like I didn't go overweight on a ceiling game from Tyler Higbee. I guess the Cardinals are that bad when it comes to defending tight ends, huh?
Yeah, that is not a rumor. So Vance McDonald, 100% Vance McDonald this week. Just keep chasing.
Yeah. Dude, but that's the thing. Like if Vance McDonald's chalk, how do I go? Like, how do I not continue to come in underweight on something like that? It just I don't know how I could come in heavy on Vance McDonald. I just don't. But let's talk about it now. The difference is that Vance McDonald is 1% projected ownership where Higbee was like 25. Does that do anything for you? Like, will you go to Vance McDonald with good old Devlin Hodges at the helm?
Well, I believe his friends call him Duck. So I don't know if you've heard this. He enjoys duck calls and hunting very much. They don't talk about that at all.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he goes by Duck. He's Duck Hodges, and
okay.
like.
Well,
yeah,
with the name like Devlin Hodges, I'm not even remotely surprised that he hunts duck.
I'm surprised you didn't know this because like on the 179 game he started, they had like 5 different bits of him doing hunting things, and they had like the duck hunting dog, and it's like duck, like duck. Everything was just duck over and over. I hate it.
So, are you talking about the Miami game? Because I promise you, I was as far away from the TV as possible on that one.
No, it was that first game against the Chargers and where he had started for and had the decent day. They were talking a lot of duck.
Yeah.
He loves duck hunting. And he and James Washington right now are bonding over hunting, and that's why they have the vibe that Mason Rudolph lacked, even though they were in college together and played together.
Yeah. How special.
So yeah, I think I would prefer Doyle out of the tight ends this week. I think the spot here going against Tampa Bay is pretty good. Doyle saw 12 targets last week. There is no Eric Ebron there anymore, so it was a very Doyle workload. It sucks that his price is up so much. I wish he were like 4K flat. I'd feel much more comfortable there. But 39 routes last week, 12 targets, 6 catches for 73 yards. Like that to me is where I'm comfortable going. But I don't see any reason not to play some Vance McDonald just because, like there's nothing really tying Devlin Hodges to any of these guys. It's not like, other than James Washington hunting thing, and he did target him a decent amount. Like it's very possible he throws to Vance McDonald more. 3 targets last week. That's not good. Vance McDonald has been really highly targeted, but like if we know this is the way that Arizona is going to give up production, and Mike Tomlin's been so resourceful this season, why would you not throw the tight end a little bit more here when you see Tyler Higbee go for 100 yards and a touchdown? Just give Vance McDonald 10 looks and see how it goes.
You would certainly think so. I mean, it is just a brutal passing offense, though. I mean, yeah. Sure, when you get the wild James Washington receptions, that's very nice. But can you really rely on that? And can you rely on them in this game to really look towards your tight end frequently? Like I said, though, Vance McDonald, if he goes completely overlooked, I would be willing to get there. You mentioned Doyle, and I'm with you on that. Price is up a little bit, though, so I'm not huge there. I see what you're saying, though. If you were just choosing between one of the top priced tight ends at 5K or higher, who would it be?
5K or higher. I mean, I think at that point, honestly, might be George Kittle. I don't mind the spot for him going against New Orleans. New Orleans, certainly a team that's pretty good on defense, but Kittle's still, I think, the most involved receiver overall, even though, Emmanuel Sanders has kind of taken some looks and Debo's had some good weeks. I still think Kittle's the guy who you'd want to go to in a tough spot. The ownership's going to be there for him, though, but projection looks okay. I don't mind Kittle. And Henry is fine, too. Like, I really don't have an issue with Henry. I just don't know that, like, I'm dying to play him as much as people always seem to be. So I think those guys would be the ones I prefer the most. Waller, a dude I'm just never really in on. I don't think Tennessee is a spot. Oh, maybe they're not a great pass defense, but I think for me it'd be Henry and Kittle. Which ones do you prefer? Because like tight end to me, I feel like it's just been a disaster most weeks, other than last week where it was the best week of my life.
I hear you. Well, Austin Hooper right now I think he's going to play this week. I don't know. He's up there in price though. Kelsey against New England. I do have interest in Kelsey at this price. Once again, this game should see its fair share of scoring, but Kelsey, I was a little surprised by this. It might be because he's coming down in terms of price, but he's getting some ownership right now, and I'm okay with that. But I don't want to go to Waller. I don't see it being necessary, like you said. Doyle's below 5K. Mark Andrews just not a spot that I have much faith in him against a pretty stout Buffalo pass defense. If I had to go to one of them, I think it would honestly be Kittle, because in a game where New Orleans will have a tough matchup, Breeze is going to have a tough matchup, I still expect them to score points at home. That should make it so Jimmy Garoppolo is forced to throw a little bit more. It's pretty basic logic on my point, but on my part, but you don't really need to take it a whole lot further than that. Sub 6K George Kittle against the New Orleans team that has been unquestionably good against tight ends almost every year. But I still expect this to be a spot where he gets a lot of opportunities. And it's not like New Orleans corners are bad where you can target them, right? So, yeah, I think Kittle would be my guy here.
Yeah, one thing, I guess, looking at it now with Kittle, and this would be the one risk I just remembered from watching that game last week against Baltimore, they did keep Kittle into block a little bit more last week, and I don't think that was because of his health as much as it was they were bringing so much pressure. And Baltimore does blitz at one of the highest rates in the league, so that's a part of it. But Kittle only ran 22 routes last week, which is down a little bit compared to what he's used to. 26 for Debo Samuel, 26 for Emmanuel Sanders. So if he does run a bit less routes for protection reasons, I guess that's something to consider against New Orleans, because New Orleans does bring a 28% pressure rate. But.
For sure. Also, keep in mind, though, he played 100% of snaps.
Yeah, so yeah, which is good for him with the ankle. I mean, didn't he have like a broken ankle going?
Yeah, he played with one against Green Bay. I'm with you, though. Generally, you'd be a little worried about that. I totally understand, but I don't know. I feel like things could open up, but it does suck that he has double-digit targets once all season. That's kind of, that kind of sucks. But I still have a good feeling about this spot, and San Francisco being forced to throw a little bit more than they generally would. All right, let's go beyond the numbers. Spags has got some good stuff, and then we'll head out. If you haven't used the sign-up code Deeper Dive, all one word. Well, my dog's sliding their ass across the carpet. What was that? Hey, what are you doing? Stop. Don't do that. Go out there. That's crazy. I turn over. She's just cruising down the hallway. Shelby, I'll
That's
take you out in a minute. Deeper dive, all one word. Get you 50% off your first. No, it's NFL strategy. One word. Get you 50%
dog
off.
scoot will throw you off your game anytime.
Dude, it's crazy. I love this dog to death, though, man. But that is some ridiculous shit. Oh, man. NFL strategy, 50% off your first month of premium membership. Awesemo Plus, Platinum, All Access. We got you covered. And we got some free stuff today, Spags, at awesemo.com. You got the NBA fantasy point projections from Awesemo.
Ooh,
NFL Premium Stack Tool, NHL line change article. So we got some free stuff happening over there. Pretty excited about it. Head over to awesemo.com and do your thing. But yeah, awesemo.com/join will get you 50% off your first month. Just use NFL strategy, all one word. All right. You ready to do
promo
this?
code Cyber Monday? Everybody use that promo code at 3 p.m. or 6 p.m.
Oh, I know. Crazy. Oh, man. Okay, Devontae Parker's 176 air yards in Week 13 were second most in the league. Turned them into 159 actual receiving yards. Also good for second most in football that week. He also had he had at least 10 targets in his last 4 games, with 47 targets since Week 9, tied for 4th in the league with Christian McCaffrey. That's crazy. Is Parker worth an elevated salary this week on the road against Gang Green?
So I don't know how confident I am in it, but I'll have some Devontae Parker. I love Devontae Parker, and I had so much of him. The Eagles stack. So I had a lot of Eagle stacks last week. I was 2v2 away from like the right build to actually be winning tournaments, which kills me. Zach Ertz, a real son of a bitch last week, who did nothing in the spots where I didn't have Tyler Higbee, but it was a really good spot for Devontae Parker. Targeted a lot there going against Philly. The Jets defense in the pass game is not as bad as people think. It is still a decent coverage group. They've gotten the rep of being like, oh, you can't run against them, so you got to pass against them, and like you'll get great results passing. That's not a sure thing every week. We've seen that happen a couple times where Dalton really didn't have a big day last week. Derek Carr got shut down. So, I mean, there are guys, like, it's not a sure thing for anybody. Fitzpatrick just keeps chucking it, though. So I'll keep trusting the fact he's going to keep chucking it. And I'll definitely have more than the field on Devontae Parker, but price point's getting weird. But the stats are just crazy for him. He's having one of the best years that nobody's talking about at all because it's Miami.
I know. I talk about an unheralded player. I said that a lot about DJ Moore earlier this season. He's starting to get a little bit more recognition. But yeah, Devontae Parker, man, he's been good. He's actually been good. He's on pace to go well over 1,000 yards this year.
And he's making like amazing catches. Like I know you watched that game with
your
Eagles
did, Spags. Thanks.
Some of those catches were just like, it was balls that were behind him, balls that were like outside of his catch radius that he got, and then with double coverage on him. He was amazing in that game.
He really was. He was. And don't get me wrong, Ronald Darby is ass. Jalen Mills has no idea how to time a ball.
Jalen Mills was so bad in that game.
Oh, God. Just treacherous. John Ross is slated to return to the Bengals after he averaged 20.5 yards per catch on 8 targets per game prior to his IR stint. Faces a Bengals team.
Oh, wait. He doesn't face the Bengals.
He does not face a Bengals team. I realized that as well.
A Browns team.
He was on a Bengals team that faces a Browns team that allows 17% DVOA boost to wide receiver 2s. Is Ross one of the better value plays on the slate? I actually don't know what your answer is going to be here.
So I'm intrigued by him. I think just given the fact that he had those monster games, and Cleveland's pass defense to me is one of those things. Their defense overall is overrated to me, or at least not as good as it looked like they were going to be last year, where they were getting really good pressure. They still had some mediocre results, but pretty poor grades across the board against the run defense and the coverage group for Cleveland. So I think this is a spot where I'm intrigued by John Ross. I think not a guy I would load up on. He's going to be as variant as can be, but he should get opportunity being back out there. I think you're bringing him back for a reason. They're bringing him back to see if he's a guy they want to keep in the organization, I think, past this season. And if he has a good day here, still no AJ Green. If you drafted AJ Green in season long, you are not happy.
I did in a bunch of them, like 6th round, and I thought I was getting striking gold in the 6th round.
Yeah, I thought he was going to play. He was talking before the season about how he wants to be the Larry Fitzgerald of Cincinnati and all that. And then seems like now he just wants another contract because Cincinnati might not give him the money he wants or whatever. I don't know, but I would take a stab on John Ross just because he's back in there. He was explosive. People might not even realize he's off the IR because people who's tracking Cincinnati news I think that's why maybe you go to John Ross, hope he has a decent day here. And it's a battle of Ohio. That's got to be, I'm sure Drew Carey is really going to be really caught up in this game.
Yeah, he wants AJ Green wants to be the Larry Fitzgerald of University of Phoenix. not the Larry Fitzgerald that actually plays football. That's an interesting one, though. I hadn't really thought much about John Ross, but he was, he had definitely built a rapport with Andy Dalton. There's no question about that. So yeah, I don't think it's crazy. I mean, it's a huge tournament risk, and you're probably getting him at like 1% ownership.
Yeah, we got him at 0.3% on DraftKings right now.
0.3%. Right. That's crazy. I'd take a flyer on even 3 or 4% John Ross. You don't need much more than that.
Yeah. We got our low owned John Ross, Vance McDonald core now, so we're good to go.
Oh God, that's disgusting. Just stick in the AFC North and get crushed. James White.
Those guys have 2 fantasy points combined.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question. They both have 0 floors. James White led the Patriots in carries in Week 13, with 14 carries, while also chipping in 8 receptions on 9 targets. Given the 5.1 yards per rush or yards per carry allowed by Kansas City, is White deserving of chalkier ownership than the 5% he currently projects for? We've talked about this a little bit throughout the show, and we've kind of broken down some interesting numbers, specifically James White numbers. Dude, if he continues to get carries, they've really, really liked this spot, but I have no idea how to project what he's going to get in the pass game or in the running game.
Yeah, look, I think it's a bit of a leap of faith this week, but I'm going to be taking it at a decent amount, definitely more than the field, but I imagine I'll be at least 20% James White, just because I don't see how you don't. I don't see how they don't look at the game film and go, we are a much better team with James White out there. I don't know that he's going to have 38 fantasy points again. He's not Christian McCaffrey, but he can certainly have a decent day again in that 20-point range, and that's what I'm looking for at his price point. So I'm okay with James White this week, and I'm intrigued by what they do with him, because this spot, to me, you're going to have a lot of room to get horizontal, a lot of room to kind of get him in the flat and see what he can do. And also, again, just being able to carry up the gut. If you're going to give him those looks, it's his shot. And of course, again, Sony Michel, I'll play 1% of, because I'll be ready for James White to just not get any touches for some reason.
Yeah, Sony Michel's price tag is what makes it difficult, because he's priced like he's actually decent.
Yeah, I don't get that. I mean, he's had the goal line equity, so I guess that's one thing where you might be able to see him run a couple in, even if he has a terrible day. But it doesn't seem to me like he should be $100 more than James White on DraftKings. That just doesn't make sense on a full point PPR site at all.
It really doesn't. He shouldn't be $100 more than, Darwin Thompson at this point.
Sony Michel should be like 4K this week, and then he would be chalk, and then we could be like feeling even better about James White.
That's very good point. But that's not the case. He's actually up there in price. So what are you going to do? Anyway, Spags, always a great time. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us as always. Before you head out, hit that thumbs up button. If you enjoy the show, you want to help support us here so we can keep putting free content out at youtubes.com/awesomeo. And we'll be back with you next time. Take us out, Spags.
Yeah, guys, go right now to awesomeo.com/join. Use that promo code NFL Strategy to get half off your first month of Awesomeo Plus. And go check out all the shows on this channel here. We got a lot of things coming up on the YouTube channel every single day. So subscribe and follow me and Lofty. We're the coolest guys who hang out with you on Wednesday mornings, I'm sure, other than the guys outside the bodega who are doing all sorts of illicit things. But follow at Lofty_D. Follow at Chris Spags. We are here for you guys. We appreciate all you watching. So have a good week 14 and good luck.
All right. Peace.